this window.
So there, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Okay, Chair Grieve, I think we're ready to go.
Okay. I call this meeting to. Sorry.
Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
Okay, I'm going to call the meeting to order of the Electoral Area Services Committee, which is a committee of the Comox Valley Regional District, to order. And our first, I guess the first comment would be around the COVID-19 situation and the fact that we are not open to the public at the meeting room, but we are sharing this on YouTube. And to all the people out there, welcome. We will probably be moving back to more personal meetings in the not too distant future, I trust. We do have the recognition of traditional territories, which is tradition at the board meetings and the committee meetings of the Comox Valley Regional District. And that's where we do recognize the fact that we are conducting our business today on the traditional unceded territory of the Comox First Nation. Now, we have a few delegations today. We have a report from the RCMP. Inspector Mike Curvis is here. And welcome, Mike. And Mike's going to do a little overview of activities of the RCMP in the Comox Valley Regional District. So over to Mike.
And Inspector Curvis, I see you're just muted right at the moment, so you just need to unmute yourself, I think. Then I'll pull up your PowerPoint here.
While he's doing that, should we move or seat, or do we do that at the end?
We usually do it after. I know SRD does it before they even receive the information. We'll vote on receipt after the report.
Sure.
There we go.
And Inspector Curvis, I see you're still muted. Oh, there you
How's that?
Perfect.
Okay. Technology. I'm going to try and keep up with it. So I want to keep this brief. I don't want to be too long. I sent two reports to Jake. The first one I sent is you can kind of review on your own time. It kind of gives you an overview of the whole valley, the differences and the file counts and different things like that. The one we want to look at is the one we see up on your screen. And I'm just going to go to the second page. I don't know if I can do that from here. Is someone going to scroll down for me from there?
You bet I can do that for you, Inspector Curvis. I think I can. Just give me one moment here.
Perfect.
Okay.
So it doesn't show Black Creek there, but the numbers there are 696. So this is an overview of the kind of the regional district file count. Files went up a little bit in the rural areas. It went from 4,348 to 4,476 over the last year. Not too significant. It's 128 files, which is about 3%. But here's where the breakdown is. You can see Black Creek has kind of got the most, the lion's share of the calls. Fanny Bay, Merville, Royston, Union Bay, Hornby, and Denman. But when I talk to Hornby and Denman, those are kind of when we are there for seasonal policing, we get a lot more calls when we're there. And that's typically from May to September. And then Mount Washington is 100 files. So that's kind of the breakdown of where the file count is. I'll say with Black Creek, if you're not familiar already, there's a house of interest on Schultz Road that's causing the lion's share of our calls. So maybe the next page now, please. So here we are is kind of the breakdown of what the files are. Other moving traffic, that's violation tickets and anything that has under the Motor Vehicle Act. If you can't see it, it's 333. Suspicious occurrence is anything from like fires and some stranger walking by a house that someone doesn't recognize. So we had a call for that. So that's 153. Unspecified assistance is exactly what it is. It's just something we can't put into a category. So that's where we slot that. 911 calls, abandoned calls are 96. Property lost, and that's people turning property into the front counter or just reporting that they've lost something so we can enter into our system if it ever shows up. Mental Health Act calls, those are the people that need our assistance in one way or another, and we get called to those for assistance. Traffic, other non-moving, mischief. Mischief is anything from defacing property to kicking down the mailbox and things that we need to get involved in. Cause of disturbance is kind of, I guess you can put loitering in there a little bit because they're causing a problem. Yelling, screaming, unruly characters, it kind of encompasses everything, and that's part of causing disturbance. Collisions, if you didn't know, the Motor Vehicle Act now, reportable offenses are $10,000 for accidents, and false alarms are 53. So that's for that. If you go to the next page. This is for Black Creek. You can see the breakdown of Black Creek there. What we're doing, traffic, and that's for our traffic section doing that. Specific occurrences and specified assistance. I guess you can't see that traffic is 121 calls, and this is for a full year from fiscal year to fiscal year, which is for us is April 1st to April 1st. And then it breaks down all the calls that we've gone to. So that's kind of where we're at. Next screen, please. So you don't, for the, where am I here? Sorry, break and enters. So residential break and enters is 15 over a year. So that's about 1.2 per month. That's not very high. That's a very low count. Business break and enters are low count. Other break and enter, that's like the sheds and Quonsets and things like that. That's 7, and then seasonal ones are 2. So it's very low counts in the B&E side of it. Next screen, please. Auto theft. So theft of auto. So those are vehicles that are worth less than $5,000. That's what we kind of go by, above 5,000, below 5,000, what the value of the car is. So there's 3, and then theft over is 2, and then theft other, which is like a motorcycle or a side-by-side, and then theft of truck, which is 1. So again, the numbers aren't that high for a fiscal year. Next screen, please. So I know it looks like a lot of dots on there, but that's all the file counts. So you can see where it's kind of congregated on the island and then all along the different regional districts. This is kind of, we've mapped everything into one, kind of shows you where the bases of the calls are. Next screen. So we'll break it down a little further here. So this is kind of the density of where the calls are. So the bigger circles means there's more files in that general area. So the small circles means it's 1 or 4 or 10 to 16 calls. And then you can see by the diagram and the 26 calls or to 52 in kind of that area. So that kind of breaks it down a little bit further about where the density is. So next file, please, or slide. So that's the break and enters. So you can see where the bases of the break and enters are. You can see up in Black Creek is where the bulk of the B&Es are, and part of that is because the Schultz Road is up there, and we have our house we have to deal with. Next screen, please. Auto theft, again, in the same general area, 1 on the island, which is not that great or insignificant. It's not a high call for service there. And again, it's the same kind of general area in Black Creek. Next screen. And this is theft from motor vehicle. And the majority of those they're in the Black Creek area again. So everything's kind of centralized in one location. And next screen. And then just the mischief. It's kind of north and south. It has no real general target area. So it's kind of all over. You can see where that is. And those are the kind of the calls for service there. Next screen. And those are our mental health act calls that we have to go assist with. So it kind of, it's all over. There's no real rhyme or reason for that. It's just where the calls for service are is where we go. And that's it for that presentation. I know it looks like a lot when you look at the screen, you see all the dots, but it's not that great. It's not, for our standards, for policing standards, it's not a lot of calls for service. Like I said, a lot of the calls could happen when we have multiple calls. It's one person or one location that's causing multiple calls. So that's where those numbers go up. So I just open up for questions if you don't, if that's okay.
I have a question, if that's all right.
Yeah.
Good, come here.
Great. So, Mike, it sounds like there's that one house on Schultz Road that's providing you with a lot of grief.
Yes.
And I guess, just questions of like, what seems to be the issue about, actually doing anything about it? Is it jurisdictional or are your hands tied in certain areas?
Well, it's not jurisdictional. It is in our area, and we take care of it. The problem is it's the gathering evidence. The people in that house are transient, so they move about, and it's difficult. A lot of it is stolen property and recovering things, and it's just evidence collection. It is someone's property. We just can't walk onto the yard and start questioning people. We have to have some evidence to go there. A lot of times the recovered vehicles are nearby, but we can't link it to anything. So it's a matter, bottom line is gathering evidence. So we have the grounds to go in there. We are on that house regularly. It is one of our problem houses, and we do take it seriously and follow up with the residents quite regularly.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
It does, yeah.
Okay.
Any questions from Director Arbor? Daniel's not muted. Is he still with us?
Shows he's still attending and he's not muted.
I know he's not muted. There you go.
Now he's back. Yeah. Director Arbor, are you there?
He's been having trouble on the internet on the island.
So I will say for the islands, we were there last week, and we'll be going there kind of unannounced until the restrictions are lifted. Once the restrictions are lifted for travel and tourism, then we'll be there on a more routine basis. We do have a schedule and an operational plan to police for seasonal policing. So that's still going ahead as long as we're allowed there, basically. So once those restrictions are lifted, we'll put that into effect.
Chair, could I have one more question, if you don't mind?
Please go ahead, yes.
So, Mike, I'm just wondering, related to COVID, have police been given any kind of direction on what they should and shouldn't kind of react to?
Well, we're still doing regular policing for any calls for service on the island. So if it's we do everything with priority calls like 1, 2, 3, and 4. We're still doing the 3s and 4s by phone. The priorities are we are attending. It's all by ferry or by our boat. Yeah, it's still business as usual, and we take our direction from our divisional DEOC. So once those instructions come from them, then we can change our pattern of policing.
Okay, so you haven't been told about like having to enforce, for example, like social isolation and distancing?
No.
Okay.
No. We don't have any authority for that because that's under a different act.
Okay.
Well, I see no further questions. So Mike, thank you very much for this update. Very informative to know that I live in an area that seems to have a lot of activity.
Yeah.
Up here.
Just, before I sign off here, I just want to talk to you about the priorities for our annual performance plan. That's part of this reason for this call as well. I have here crime reduction for prolific offenders, which kind of fits into the category, and then traffic and road safety. Did you want to put something like property on there or theft from motor vehicles?
Not sure.
Because I can put anything on here. It's quite a large group of categories. Traffic is basically road enforcement with, accidents and moving violations. Crime reduction, that's the prolific offenders. That's the people that are our clients, regular clients, and we're doing that on a routine basis because that's a divisional priority. If you want to put something else on there that covers like the theft from motor vehicles, because that seems to be one of the things that's highlighted. We can put that on there, and then we can target that.
Yeah, I would agree on that. That's
Yeah.
probably the most number of calls or emails I will get is not the break and enters, but in cars.
Okay. I will add that and then resend it to Russell for review.
And RVs too, I would think, especially in the.
Yeah, that we can put that in there. I
tourism
can
sector.
actually manipulate the comments and put that in there.
Very good. Okay, so now I guess we need a motion to receive the report.
So moved.
Second.
Oh, there he is. Any more discussion? All those in favor, or sorry, all those opposed? That carries. Okay, now on to, sorry.
Thank you very much. I'm just going to sign off because I got other things to do.
Thanks,
I'm
Mike.
sure you do, sir. Thank you so much for
Okay,
that.
thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
So number 2 on the list is Forest Lakewood. Kristen Evans and Mike's here too, Mike Van Ham. So over to you guys for your report.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity to present today. There'll be 2 presenters today, or there was to be 2 presenters. There will be 2, but Mr. Mark Fortin, the land manager for Forest Lakewood, was unable to meet the timeline today to participate in the presentation. We did have the opportunity to go over it with him last week. And he said it was okay if Christian Evans, the project environmental scientist and project manager for the Ham Road project, will fill Mark's role for the couple of slides that he is to talk about. The overall objective of the presentation is to give you a very terse, less than 10 minutes overview of biosolids and biosolids use in land improvement, and to provide you with the opportunity to answer questions or ask questions and receive some answers. Biosolids are being used in the regional district in the restoration of degraded lands and have been used in the fertilization of agricultural lands in the past. Next slide, please. And the next slide will be Christian talking.
Great, thanks, Mike. So yeah, like Mike said, Mark sends his regrets. He had every intention of joining the April 6th meeting, but as the season gets a little busier for him, he was unable to make it. So he's given me the okay to present his perspective here. So I think Mark is possibly known to several of you. He owns a certain amount of property up and down the island. I believe it's 940 hectares within the CVRD and many more hectares of land on Vancouver Island. So he was working for Forest Lakewood. He's a land manager on the island, and he cares about the land. It's an investment for Forest Lakewood, and Mark has sought to increase the productivity and value of the land that he manages. One of the properties that he's responsible for is the Ham Road property, as we call it. So it's about 800 hectares alongside the Inland Island Highway, just along Ham Road. You can see it on this slide outlined in red. So his objectives at this site was a logged site when he purchased it. And so he's cleared some areas at the southern end, which is on the right-hand side of this slide. And he has some forested plantations at the northern end on the left-hand side. So his objectives for this piece of property are to decrease the Scotch broom cover. It's pretty severe in parts of this property, and we'll give you a close-up in the next slide. And also to develop some productive hayfields in the cleared southern portions, and to grow trees and increase tree growth in the forested portions of the site. So if you click, we'll get a zoom in of the southern portion there. So this is visible from Ham Road. There's some grass growing here. They've made some attempts in the past to put in hayfields with limited success. And since clearing, there's also been quite an infestation of broom, which you can see as kind of the dark green smear in the upper part of that photo. And that broom is present throughout the entire site. So the area we're currently focusing on is that southern area for biosolids fertilization, marginal land improvement, and broom reduction. So these cleared areas are disturbed, as you can see in the left-hand picture here. It's a rocky site. The soils are low in organic matter. They're compacted, so grass is growing in some portions, but not growing great. And as you can see on the right-hand side, there are a lot of areas with significant broom establishment. So I met Mark at an open house at a wastewater treatment plant a couple of years ago, and we chatted. He took a look at our posters and our photos, and I told him about biosolids, and he showed a lot of interest. So that's where our relationship began. And he approached us essentially and invited us to the site to take a look at how we could help him achieve his objectives on the site. Next slide, and back over to you, Mike.
Thanks, Christian. A little bit about Silvus and who we are. We're an environmental consulting contracting firm. We're based in British Columbia, and our sole focus is residuals. So biosolids, pulp mill sludges, ash products. I started Silvus 30 years ago as a budding ecologist in my PhD program at UBC. I believe that our ultimate sustainability, however you want to define that, is ultimately dependent on the innovative management of the waste products that we create. We research, recommend, and implement beneficial residuals management programs. We work with government agencies, with landowners, and with residuals generators. We've worked and helped present or helped develop the Canadian-wide CCME policy on beneficial biosolids use, conducted research that led to the development of the OMAR regulation. That's the organic matter recycling regulation that governs biosolids use in British Columbia. And we've also worked with the Comox Valley Regional District in enabling Skyrocket to be used in the phase 1 landfill closure at the Comox Valley Waste Management, from the Comox Valley Waste Management Center, and also assisted the regional district in responding to the new revisions that are coming out on the OMAR regulation. The province the regulation is currently under review right now. Next slide. So what are biosolids? Biosolids are made from things that go down the drain from your house, food and poop scraps, or food scraps and poop. And at the wastewater treatment plant, those materials are separated from the effluent that comes into the treatment plant. They're processed, and then the resulting material looks like wet peat moss. This is an example. This is a picture of Metro Vancouver biosolids arriving to the Lehigh Sand and Gravel Mine on the other side of the water from you guys to be used in mine reclamation. It's about 80% organic matter, has a smell of wet peat moss, and it's an excellent source of nitrogen, phosphorus, and all the essential plant nutrients. The material is regulated, so the quality of the material is regulated, as is the process to develop biosolids. So it's not sewage sludge, it's not septic. That black material is not just dewatered poop. It is actually transformed in a digestion process under elevated temperatures, generating methane, and held for extended periods of time in that environment to control pathogens and stabilize the biosolids product. So it shouldn't have a significant odor, and it shouldn't have any pathogenic concerns. Next slide. 60 to 80% of all the biosolids generated in the province are used either as an ingredient in compost or fabricated soils, as an amendment for forest fertilization, reclaiming disturbed sites, and as a fertilizer in agriculture. The top left photo is the Lehigh Seashell Gravel Mine. That's where the biosolids were destined from Metro Vancouver in the previous slide. Biosolids and pulp and paper mill sludge from House Sound Pulp and Paper have been used in an operational mine reclamation program there for the past 20 years in the reclamation of sedimentation ponds and slopes. The mine is highly visible to the ocean, to the inlet, as well as to neighbors on the other side. It encompasses both First Nations land, privately held land, and Crown land with the Seychelles First Nations. Biosolids from Gibson's, Powell River, Seychelles, Metro Vancouver, and Howe Sound pulp and paper mill sludge have been used there to establish fast-growing poplar plantations on sedimentation ponds, reclaiming slopes, and establishing vegetation habitat. The top right photo is forest fertilization. The Regional District of Nanaimo fertilizes stands with their biosolids. Whistler, Seattle, Tacoma, Prince George have all or are currently fertilizing stands with biosolids. That's the application technology there, and I'll give you a little closer up of that later on. The lower left is actually the production of reclamation soil for use in the closure of your landfill or your own skyrocket. But that's an example of composted products such as Kelowna's Ogo-Grow or fabricated soils that you can use to grow vegetables in your community gardens. And those are generated primarily in the province by Metro Vancouver and Abbotsford. If it's not a composted product, if it's composted products, then you've got Ogo-Grow, those kinds of things. And the one next to it is just a typical land application, agricultural fertilization project. That one happens to be occurring or had occurred in the Comox Valley Regional District as well. Next slide. Kind of related to the, examples related to the work that is going on the Ham Road property. You've got that compacted soils that are degraded, low nutrient value, low organic matter concentrations. They're not atypical of the kinds of sites that we see that are old or abandoned or not in use anymore, aggregate pits, borrow pits. This is a photograph of one of the borrow pits that was used in the late 90s for the building of the Coquihalla, the connector, the 97C that goes from Merritt over to Kelowna. This happens to be Bob's Lake Pit located near the summit there, where you've got all that low or even elevation pine plantations up there. This is what the site looked like, and then working with the Ministry of Transportation and Highways, applying biosolids, incorporating that into the area, doing a little bit of regrading, and then seeding with agronomic species. You get the next slide, which is an example of a single application in a reclamation initiative, establishing agronomic species on those areas that are self-sustaining through today. The other example that's relevant to Mark and the Forest Lakewood Ham Road property is forest fertilization. And the next slide, please. So this is an image of a tree core. A tree core is taken from the tree and goes into the middle of the tree. Each line or each ring in that core indicates a year, and the rate of growth is indicated by the size of that ring. This is from the RDN, or I guess it's Mosaics woodlot, located in very close proximity to Nanaimo and within the RDN. This shows activities related to forest fertilization or forest management. Oftentimes, at the beginning, you can see from 1985 up how slow the growth has been. It's a very poor site, very poor soils. The stand was spaced, so that should allow the trees to grow faster because there's less competition and they have more light and should have more access to water. And you can see the response associated with the juvenile spacing. And then between 1991 and 1992 was a biosolids fertilization activity. And you typically don't see a growth response in the year of application. The trees, their buds, the trees, to be anthropomorphic, the trees sense what their current environment is and set their buds for next year based on the conditions they experience this year. So when you fertilize them, they've already self-determined how much they're going to grow next year, and it doesn't really matter. But the next year, when they do that reassessment again, then they go, okay, I've got a lot more nutrients. I've got the ability to grow. And then you see increase in growth response by the widths of the rings, and they last typically for 3 to 4 years. Here you're seeing a 4-year growth response following application, 4 to 5 years growth response. And then after 1997, the growth rate starts to slow down a little bit as that nutrient capital is used up in the forest floor. The interesting thing about biosolids as compared to animal manures or chemical fertilizers is that the digestion process that's used to make biosolids really stabilizes the form of nutrients in the material, in contrast to a cow manure or chemical fertilizer, which is, you know, immediately available material, or animal manure may be available over 1 and maybe into the 2nd year. Whereas biosolids, that nitrogen is kind of a slow release. It's inherent in the organic matter in the biosolids. So as that mineralizes and releases the nitrogen, the trees or the grasses respond. So it's basically a slow release source of those kinds of fertilizers. Next slide. How is all this regulated? It's regulated under the Organic Matter Recycling Regulation. The regulation specifies the quality of the biosolids. It has to meet specific quality standards in order to be biosolids, and that's process and product quality, as I said before. So you have some biosolids. Mark approaches and says, "Hey, I'm interested in doing this." So we go out, look at his property, look at what he wants to do. Is biosolids required here? Is there a nutrient deficiency? What is his objectives? Can those objectives be achieved with biosolids? Biosolids is a tool. It's not Dr. McKilligood's cure-all, save-all material. And then if there is an opportunity, or there's a fit, then we conduct pre-application soil sampling to determine the fertility, make sure that it is nutrient limited, and analyze biosolids that may be available for use. Then it moves into a phase where we calculate the application rates based on what the need of the crop or the vegetation to be there, if it's forest, if it's grass. And we author a land application plan. And that's much like a nutrient management plan for agriculture. It identifies buffer setbacks, site-specific considerations, all of the data that has been gathered up to this point in time, the objectives, and then that plan. And then that plan and notification is submitted to the Ministry of Environment, the Agricultural Land Commission in this case, because this is within the ALR, and the Health Authority. Biosolids isn't prepared, like you can't just order it and it comes out in a lump sum. It comes out bit by bit. So you typically have to store biosolids on the site. You do your field planning, boundaries, flagging areas. And that's also where we would typically do a stakeholder consultation. It's not required underneath the OMAR regulation. There's no requirement to talk to neighbors, but we make it a point that we go door to door and talk with the neighbors prior to any applications. And then at the end, we actually undertake the applications, fertilize, supervise the applications, log the activities, and then go back in and do soil sampling again to say, did we achieve what we set out to do? The application rate is confirmed. What is the current status of the site? And that's basically an annual, those are the activities in an annual time step, and a land application plan is under the current regulation is required every year for the subsequent year's work. So another application would require this identical process to go through. What does this look like? Next slide. These are biosolid stockpiles in bays at the Hammond Road site. So biosolids is delivered by truck. The truck backs in. It's got a nice bed of wood waste, so we don't get a lot of rocks on the fields or in the manure spreaders. They're covered over the winter to minimize the water ingress into the site. And then the biosolids are applied in the spring. Usually in the spring or in the fall, depending on forest fertilization can be a little bit different than agricultural fertilization. And the application technology, next slide, looks like this. That's a tractor with a manure spreader. Horizontal augers are typical. This is a vertical auger mixer. They give us a wider distribution than the horizontal augers. So the biosolids is loaded into the manure spreaders. The application rates are calculated, and we validate those application rates by putting out square tarps, and the equipment drives over it. We weigh those to confirm the amount of material that has to go on to a given area at a given time. For forest fertilization, it's a little bit different because you can't drive through the stands. And so the application technology is similar to the one in the yellow truck there. It's a rock truck. It's either a rock truck or a forwarder, and it's a forestry forwarder, and it's modified with a large hopper with a moving floor on the bottom of it. And that moving floor goes into a hydraulic fan, a 3-blade hydraulic fan, and it's basically biosolids hits the fan technology, and the biosolids is flung out over or through the stand about 30 meters on either side of a road like this or a skid trail. Next slide. This is the Ham Road site. The application, the pictures that you saw, the application in the previous slide, those occurred at the Ham Road site in 2019. And this is the site this spring. This is 2020. The grass is established and growing, and the Scotch broom is at a competitive disadvantage to the grow of the tree, to the growing of the vegetation. It's a nitrogen fixer, so if it has fertile soils, it can't compete as well as other plants can. That to say, we're still going to be undertaking manual or equipment-based removal of the Scotch broom on that site in conjunction with the biosolids fertilization. And then once you have a healthy stand, a healthy soil that can sustain a crop, agronomic species or wildland species, then you can minimize the ingress of Scotch broom. And we've at the Seashell mine, we've noticed over the 20 years that we've been working there that the areas that we use biosolids on, the Scotch broom tends not to reestablish itself there when we have dense cover. And when the soil nutrient concentrations start to diminish, say 10 years later on, if you see Scotch broom coming in there, it's usually a good visual indicator that your soil nutrient status has diminished from a nitrogen perspective, and it's time for a reapplication or the use of chemical fertilizer as you see fit.
Mike?
And that's it.
Oh, good. Okay, I was just going to check and see how long you're going to go for.
Yeah, next slide is questions.
Okay, any questions? Director Mir.
Great, thank you. And thanks for your presentation, Mike. That was really informative. So, one of the things you haven't mentioned, and I think this is probably what the concern is around biosolids, is those PFAS and contaminants of concern. So maybe if you wouldn't mind, do you monitor those type of compounds in your soils? Do you have that capacity?
What typically happens is that, and in the development of regulations, a whole host of these parameters are analyzed in biosolids. So the regulations use trace metals as a proxy for a lot of these emerging substances of concern or trace contaminants, and those metals are used as a proxy for those parameters. For many small municipalities, the analysis of those parameters are horrifically expensive, and that's not done. We do analyze, in Metro Vancouver and the larger generators have quite active programs looking at things like dioxins and furans, coplanar PCBs, PFOS. PFOS is relatively new. We've started monitoring or sampling for that in different biosolids now, but the application technology, or the analysis technology, has not been refined to the point at which they can actually be sure they're seeing it as yet. So we need to get the academics are working on a defined technology to analyze for those materials. We have conducted research projects looking at those kinds of compounds in the soil in conjunction with the Ministry of Environment and First Nations. So we've done some research projects looking at, first, can we see it in the biosolids, yes or no? Okay, if we apply biosolids to the soil, then can we see it in the soil? Yes or no? And then if it's in the soil, or if we can see anything in the soil, is it taken up in the vegetation? Yes or no? And what goes to look back to make sure that we're making sure that we've got like everything that the regulations have in place are confirmed with stuff in the field.
Okay. And specific to the Ham Road site, is that land that's being regenerated for hay production, is that going to be cut for hay, or will animals be grazing at all on that property? Do you know?
I don't know that for sure. I think right now it's to be cut, is my understanding. There is a delay period from the grazing of animals, like grazing of cattle, basically cattle or sheep, from a surface application, basically to prevent the animals from eating the biosolids
Okay.
on the ground. But
And one last question, sorry if
Sure.
you don't mind. You mentioned that, you know, there are biosolids coming in from other jurisdictions into the CVRD. Do you know, like, I know CVRD produces Class A compost. What level of compost the other jurisdictions produce? And who keeps track of like where all of that compost is coming in from and where it's being applied? Is that all Ministry of Environment? Because not all of it is on ALR land, so the land commission's not going to know where everything is.
Absolutely, yeah. The Ministry of Environment would have any material that's applied to land would need to be under the OMAR, would have a land application plan, and so you can go onto their website and find any land application plans within any regions right now, and identify, and then they would have specific details on where that material comes from, all the quality, soil data, all of that is on the internet. You know, the land application plan aspects. Interestingly enough, the OMAR is under review right now, and there will be changes to the regulation. And one of those changes that has been suggested, but we've suggested it, is that the regional governments within the area be notified along with Ministry of Environment, Health, and the Agricultural Land Commission. And then First Nations engagement will also be an aspect of that. And we've been working with the Ministry of Environment to do the First Nations group. Specific to your question about the types of biosolids or types that come in there, Skyrocket is a Class A compost, so that's unrestricted distribution or giveaway. Class A biosolids growing medium like Metro Vancouver makes, or James Plant, other people, that's unrestricted distribution or giveaway. If you generate a Class A biosolids, you still need a land application plan. It's exactly the same format that we do. So a land application plan is indifferent to the class. It's still, regardless of whether you generate Class A or Class B biosolids, you still need a land application plan. And the biosolids that's currently being used in the regional district is Class B biosolids.
B, sorry, or
yeah,
D?
Class B as in Bob.
Okay. Right, thanks.
And the difference between B and A is very slight. There's a minor change in the trace element concentrations that are allowed in the biosolids. And Class B biosolids has 99.9% of all pathogens killed in the biosolids, whereas Class A is 99.99% of all pathogens killed in the biosolids.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any questions from any directors?
I'm
Dr.
good,
Arbor?
thank you. I'm
You're
good.
good?
Thank you for the presentation, Mike.
You're welcome.
Yeah, super presentation, that's for sure. When you talk about trace metals, what is the most problematic of the trace metals that can occur in this material?
A lot of it can be, it can be biosolid specific. It's kind of geeky, but you can, different areas, depending on where they get their drinking water from, you can tell whether it's a surface water or groundwater source, and more aggressive water will will strip copper out of the pipes, and so you will see more copper. So,
Mhm.
you know, if you were to look at Gibson's and Seashell, one's on a groundwater well, one's surface water. One has a more aging population than another one. Another one has more newer PEX piping and plastic piping as compared to copper. And so you can see these changes in the trace elements in biosolids, but the element of most concern is more copper, because we tend to have more copper in our biosolids here. But suffice it to say, there's the concentrations in the biosolids itself, and then the OMAR regulation is linked to the contaminated site regulation. And so we look at the soil quality from the most stringent perspective of the contaminated site criteria, with the idea that, you know, like if Mark's Road is agriculture right now, in the future, it could be a residential development, it could be industrial land, like who knows what the future use of any of the land is going to be. And so we always default to the most stringent regulatory framework that's out there. And so we may have higher concentrations of copper in the biosolids, but at the end result of the soil it won't result in a concentration increase over and above the most stringent regulatory framework.
That's extremely interesting. So the pH of the water is very important.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So that's it for me. That's it for other questions. And I'd like to take the opportunity to thank you guys. And like I say, extremely informative. And I'll call for a motion to receive this report.
Move receipt.
Any opposition? Hearing none, it's received. So thank you very much. And we're moving on to reports now. The first report, of course, is the management report for receipt.
Move receipt.
The second, any discussion on the management report? See none. I have one small question, and that is the perennial one with me is the status of the public assent process to increase the maximum requisition for the Mount Washington Fire Service.
Thank you very much, directors. And at this time, our community services staff are not present. Or is Doug on the? Doug is on the line.
He was.
Doug, are you there?
Yep, I am here on the line. Can you hear me?
I'll refer to Doug.
Okay, so I look forward to some update at our next CASC, if that's fine.
I think our plan we had in place was to bring it forward once our consultant had larger and more accurate numbers, and we're just in the process of hiring that consultant team to look at it. If that's sufficient, or we can report back next CASC if you like. It wasn't too long ago we did bring forward a report, though, during the budget process outlining some of those parameters.
Okay, well, as you probably know, I want to expedite this process as much as possible. So thank you. And that's an interesting picture you got in the back there, Doug, whatever that is.
Oh, that's Scott Bitcham original, I guess. From our local art gallery.
Oh, very good. What do they say? The recovery is going to be buy local, stay local, shop local, go local. Okay, so that's it for the report. Call the question. All in favor or any opposed? I'm sorry. None opposed, and that carries. Okay, moving on to, we have a report on biosolid regulations for receipt.
Move receipt.
Okay, and seconded. And over to staff.
Thank you very much, directors, chair and directors, and Vince Van Togeren is here, and he's our environmental analyst who prepared the report at your request. And just a brief presentation, as biosolids have been discussed in length, but can answer any questions with respect to the report.
Sure. Thank you, Russell. Yeah, as Russell alluded to, I did have some notes here that I was prepared to speak to, but I felt that Silas's presentation was quite comprehensive in covering most of what was in my report. So if there were any additional questions, I'd be prepared to answer them.
And a question from Director Hamir.
Yes, thanks. So, as Silvis mentioned, the regional district isn't always made aware of when biosolids are being applied. Is there any way that staff can get access to those, either the LAPs or connect with the Ministry of Environment on a regular basis to find out where biosolids are being intended to be applied?
Thank you very much for the question, Director. My advice at this time would be that the public be referred to the ministry site. The ministry are the ones responsible for administering this and having the information. Information can directly be provided through the ministry. Having said that, though, if the public is ever has an inquiry or otherwise, staff will do our best to help them navigate the ministry information that they have available.
Okay, and then just a slight follow-up.
Please.
Are staff at all concerned about any of the contaminants of concern, like the emerging compounds that have yet to be fully appreciated for their impacts on the environment? What my concern is that eventually, if biosolids are found to contain compounds that we're not testing for right now, that we are then potentially liable in the future, similar to the way that CFB Comox had to do a whole bunch of testing around their PFAS contamination in the water, and that the regional district, I'm still trying to figure out who would be responsible if one of these sites did become a contaminated site.
The case of the Department of National Defense was with respect to fire retardant foam,
Yeah.
not related to septage or biosolids. It is the responsibility of the regional district in managing the sewage system to ensure that we are up to date with respect to following the current guidelines and standards, and that we do, and we take very seriously. The liquid waste management plan is a means of us assessing the form of treatment in a public format with both a technical and public advisory committee. And certainly that is taking a look at not only where the regulations are today, but where they are in the future, and guiding us in terms of how we should prepare in terms of treatment levels for the liquid waste as well as biosolids moving forward.
Vince, you have something to say?
I guess, yeah, in relation to the emerging substances of concern, I mean, that is a common thing in my research that I found, and it's a common theme of consultation that the ministry receives in regards to updates to OMAR. What the ministry has to say on this currently is current research to date hasn't indicated issues with public or environmental health due to these ESOCs. And another thing that's important to note with these substances is that the technology to detect them has often advanced faster than our knowledge of what potential issues there could be due to these substances in the environment. So just because we can detect them in the biosolids doesn't imply that there is a environmental or public health impact due to their presence.
Okay, thanks. One last question, sorry, and this is more a financial one. I don't know if you can answer this. I saw a cost of about $500,000 to manage our biosolids program. Do you have any idea what we are getting in return for? Do we sell our biosolids to the public? I'm assuming so through Skyrocket. What kind of return we're making from the sale of the product?
I'll just refer that question to Mark Rutten, who is here as well, Director.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. The budget includes around $50,000 in revenue for the sale of biosolids compared to the cost that you mentioned. So definitely not a money-making venture, but required as part of the sewage treatment process.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions from Director Arbor?
Sure, just a sec. Yeah, that's a good topic. I guess when you guys talk about emerging compounds, you would be talking about pharmaceuticals and otherwise, because that's my assumption, unless that is not true. But that would be a legitimate concern. But I agree that ultimately the province put in the regulatory framework in place, and I understand with the skyrocket on our website, we actually recommend not to use it for food growing. I think when I purchased some last year, I got 3 loads, which was good value, by the way, in terms of what it does. But I just applied it for flower gardens, landscaping as recommended on the website. So that's a precautionary thing. But maybe we should encourage the province, like for Arzina, to continue to look at the research around that, and if there's any red flags that arise around possible impacts on water, groundwater, and things like that, we should stay in the loop of that for sure. So unless Director Ramirez or Director Grieve have further actions, I was pleased to receive those reports today.
Thank you. I just have one question that I asked many years ago and never got an answer on, and that's when we talk about medical facilities like our new hospital, what happens to all the radioactive isotopes that go down into the sewer system? I'll wait another 5 years for that answer then.
First,
because you
just want to assure you that we don't have knowledge that that is in fact the case. If you would like us to make some inquiries or look into the matter, we definitely can do a bit of research for you.
Yeah, you'd think they'd have some kind of filter or something on that stuff, but just people that expel it after they get the tracer elements injected into them. I mean, I know from talking to vets out there, the veterinary doctors, that they aren't allowed to use them because they can't control the eventual dispelling of those isotopes. So just a question. I know it probably amounts to very little in the bigger picture of things, but we'll let that go. Then we are on receipt. Anybody not in favor? Then that carries. Okay, now we have the advisory panels, our A, B, and C, APCs for receipt.
I'll move receipts of all of them.
Second.
Okay, all the minutes concurrently. Any discussion on those minutes? Hearing none. Anybody opposed? Then that carries. Now moving right along, we have development permit for 1782 Ryan Road for receipt.
No receipt.
Second.
Over to CAO.
Thank you very much, Chair and Directors. And on the line is Jody McLean, Rural Planner, who will introduce this report and any applicant if they happen to be available.
Hello, this is Jody here. The applicants are Preston Story and Ron Dodd. In your agenda package there, page 7 and 8 illustrates the photos of the site, and page 12 has a site plan. This is a commercial industrial development permit to accommodate the development in a rural context. This particular lot is a commercial property along Ryan Road between Anderton Road and the airport. It's surrounded by other commercial industrial lots with residential across the road. And the owners are proposing to add 2 new buildings to it for use by the commercial tenants. This type of development permit requires a rainwater management plan, considerations of development form and character, and landscape treatment along the entire frontage. For landscaping, the owners are proposing to place shrub massing, mostly rhododendrons and pampas grass behind the existing chain link fence. The frontmost building is intended to be metal sided with 2 bay doors at the front, same color scheme as the existing building. The back building is intended to be open-faced shelter behind a retaining wall, so it won't be visible from the front. And they're accommodating a rainwater management plan through a plan that's been prepared by a professional engineer. It directs water to the sides, swales, and infiltration trench, so it won't affect the neighbors. The Advisory Planning Commission reviewed the application, submitted approval as proposed. Staff drafted a permit attached to report, and we recommend that it be approved also. Mr. Chair.
Thanks very much. Do we have the proponent here online?
Yes, this is Ron Dodd here.
Thanks, Ron. Do you have anything to add?
No, this is our first go at development permit. So we think we've answered all the questions, and we've been in touch with Jody, and he's done a great job for us.
Well, thank you for that. Any questions from the directors for either the proponent or the staff?
No,
It
I'm
looks
good.
good. It looks good
All-
to me.
Yeah.
Thank
Very
you for
good.
the work.
Okay. So we are on receipt. What's that? I hear James Warren in the background. No?
No, I think that's another meeting going on in my house.
Okay. So on receipt, all opposed? Hearing none, that carries. And recommendation.
Move the recommendation.
Second.
Seconded on the recommendation. Any further discussion on that? Hearing nothing, I'll call the question. Any opposed to the recommendation? That also carries. Number 4, Area B, a development permit for 5228 Island Highway
Move
for
receipt.
receipt.
Second.
Move second on receipt, over to staff.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is Jody again. The owner here is Mountain Ridge Tree Farms, and on the line, I believe, is the agent, Tobin Lachlan. The agenda package, page 6, has the air photo that illustrates the area in question, and page 11 has the subdivision plan. This is a property, it's a split zone property, where the lower part is in the agricultural land reserve, and the top portion is zoned residential. This development permit is the farmland protection guidelines. It's triggered by subdivision that creates lot lines within 30 meters of agricultural land. The guidelines seek to create subdivision design that can accommodate the zone's development potential without interfering with the agricultural potential of the farmland. Proposed subdivision design creates 2.8 hectare lots with their rear lot lines offset 25 meters from the agricultural land reserve boundary at the closest point. When combined with the zone's required rear yard setback of 7.5 meters, it creates a viable building envelope that will not place any buildings within 30 meters of agricultural land. Both the Agricultural Advisory Planning Commission and the Ministry of Agriculture's regional agrologists reviewed and recommend approval as proposed, and staff drafted the permit and recommends it be approved as proposed also. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Does the agent for the proponent have anything to add?
No, just that the plan moving forward is been good to work with staff, and that we're pleased to be able to meet all the requirements of the ALR setbacks.
Any questions from directors?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions, mostly arising
Okay.
out of Jill Hatfield, our regional agrologist, her letter. So regarding the notation on title, is that something that we can do?
It's Jody here. Yes, we do that in the form of adding that notation on the development permit, and the development permit is registered on title. So that's our means of doing it.
Okay, and so has that been incorporated in this current proposal, or is that something we'd have to adjust?
Correct. It's in the permit that we drafted.
Okay.
Anything else, Dr. Hamir?
Nope, that's it.
You good? Okay.
The question I would have with that is,
Director Arbor?
I
Go
think
ahead.
the applicant was trying to speak, I think.
yes,
Yes, I said go ahead.
oh, the issue that arises with that is that the property owner has children that he's actually looking to move this property to possibly in the future, so that they would have title, but that would interfere as per the farmland. If they had to put fence up, they would be able to continue with the tree farm in that area if it had to be completely fenced. I mean, I understand the concern, but we also are trying to keep this as an active tree farm.
So maybe if staff could clarify that notation, how would that inhibit the tree farming?
Hi, it's Jody here. So yeah, just on the wording, the notation. So it's a bolded text in the front issue, part 1 of the development permit, and it states subject property is adjacent to an agricultural operation where normal farm practices may result in noise, dust, odor, and/or other disturbances. The Right to Farm Act protects the normal farm practice as defined by the Act and protects farmers from nuisance claims. So any future purchasers of the property will get copies of whatever is listed on title, and that's part of what they have to, the disclosure part of it. Yeah, and as Tobin mentioned, when it was reflected in Jill's comments there, is that this is still an active tree farm, or still an active farm, and that that's why we're not recommending any fencing at this time, is because it might actually inhibit agricultural operations.
Okay.
To do that.
And I don't know if that answers the proponents or the questions.
Is the proponent still online?
Yep.
Okay.
The question for us is if we have to put on title fencing, then to be able to make the application go through, then it's going to inhibit what he's doing for farming at this time. And like I say, he has no. The only reason he's doing this at this time is because this is sort of his last opportunity to do so, to protect properties and things or lots for his children. So it's kind of what they're trying to do as a family. The kids do work at the farm, but as they're getting older, they're going to be having families and wanting to move closer to the farms and be able to work on it. So.
I believe the fencing is not being included on the notation. Is that right, Jody?
That is correct.
Okay.
Then no issue.
Okay.
So any further questions?
No, I don't have any question. Just glad to see a family figuring out how to make it all work.
As long as they don't ring that bell too long. Yeah, it's an interesting spot there on the Island Highway because there's a lot of split zoning, including the country market's all split zone too. So it's very complicated. Doesn't make it easy. Okay, so seeing nothing further, let's call it on receipt. All in favor, or beg your pardon, all opposed? Hearing nothing, that carries. And the recommendation?
I'll move the recommendation.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Any further discussion on that? Seeing none, Any opposed to the recommendation? Then that carries unanimously. Now, I would like to ask if the committee would entertain a motion to receive the addendum. And we're going to vary the agenda to bring it forward because I believe the proponent is online.
I'll move that. Second.
Okay. Okay, so to receive the addendum, all in favor, any opposed? That carries. And to vary the agenda, as I guess is that one motion, Jake, or is that two motions?
If that is the will of the committee to vary the agenda and receive the addendum, we certainly can.
So we can lump them together. Okay, sounds good. Okay, that brings us to a report for receipt of a development permit on 9022 Clarkson. And so a motion to receive that report.
Move receipt.
Over to staff.
Thank you very much, Chair and Directors, and Brian Chow is here to introduce this report and answer any of your questions.
Hi, Brian.
Hi there, everyone. First of all, I'd like to introduce the applicants to the table, I guess. There are three. They're Neil Bannock, Warren Stevenson, actually four, Ralph Van der Waal, and their general record is Patrick Brandreth, and they should be on the Zoom system now.
Welcome, Ralph and Patrick.
Okay, so we received a commercial and industrial farming character development permit for the property at 9022 Clarkson Avenue. It's a 1.24 hectares in area and is zoned tourist commercial 1. The owner would like to propose a 29 tourist commercial unit and 1 residential unit development on this property. As the subject property is zoned Tourist Commercial 1 or TC, a commercial and industrial farming character development permit is required. I just want to mention that this property is in the Black Creek Oyster Bay Water Local Service area, and there is an existing water connection at the property right now. To manage and balance water consumption, the applicant is proposing an above ground cistern tank to manage the supply and demand of water. The OCP contains development permit areas for farming character of the proposal. And I'll go through the highlights of the various sections of the farming character guidelines. The proposed tourist accommodation units are made up of 3 styles, which are shown in Appendix A. And the 3 styles of tourist commercial units are classified as units A, B, and C. Area of the unit, the ground floor has tandem parking space to accommodate 2 vehicles. Units 8 and C have 2 stories above the parking area, and unit B, which is located along the waterfront, has 1 story above parking. The proposed building exterior features cedar shingle siding with metal claddings and metal roofing. The fascia, window trims, doors, and wood railings are proposed to be painted charcoal gray. For landscaping, the proponent is proposing a 3-meter wide planted buffer abutting the residential lots to the north and south. In addition to landscaping, there will be a solid 2.5-meter high timber fence that runs along the property lines as well. The total cost of landscaping is estimated to be $139,000 plus, and we will take a security deposit at 125% of the cost estimate, which is going to be over $170,000. And this will be the subject condition prior to the issuance of the development permit. Screening, as mentioned before, there will be a 3-meter wide vegetative buffer to buffer along the residential lots, north and south of the property. In terms of parking, as each unit has 2 tandem parking spaces for each unit, there's also going to be additional 8 visitors parking space at the frontier of the property. So there will be there will not be any parking along the road from this proposal. The rainwater management plan was reviewed by CVRD engineering services staff, and it was deemed meeting the development permit area guidelines. This proposal was referred internal departments for comments. I just want to highlight that the engineering staff provided comments that they have comments on the above ground system, and they will encourage applicants to reach out to Island Health for comments for any proposal that they may be required. Just a reminder that this is only a forming character development permit, so any approval or discussions of Island Health will have to be dealt at the building permit stage, and so this will come later on. The Advisory C Planning Commission met on April 16th, and the APC recommended DP approval because the proposal meets the guidelines. The design has been well considered and accounts for environmental consideration and floodplain restrictions, such as a 20-meter floodplain setback and flood construction level to meet the flood situation at the year 2100. Planning staff supports the issuance of the permit, subject to the receipt of the landscape security deposit as mentioned earlier, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Brian. So does Ralph or Patrick have anything to add?
Hi, this is Neil Banich with WA Architects. We're the design architects for the project. So I might just give a very, thank you. Brian, you made a very detailed description of the project, but just to give you kind of a quick overview of how the design got there and where we are. You know, the first thing we had to deal with was the setback issues from the waterfront, as well as the floodplain height, which predicated all of the buildings kind of being up on pilings. So from a form and character perspective, we kind of looked around at what a lot of rural communities and waterfront communities, working waterfronts used to look like. And a lot of times we would see shed-style buildings perched up on pylons along waterfronts. So we've kind of taken that as the inspiration for the project. You know, we're using real materials on here, such as cedar shakes and metal roofing, which is kind of what we would have seen in the past when we looked around waterfront kind of working industrial areas. We've also laid the site out as kind of a ring using the perimeter road and a landscape buffer to provide the setback from the neighboring properties. And by doing this, we've been able to open up the entire center part as kind of an open common area, trying to get views to each of the units out to the waterfront. And we've also staggered all of the units so that the units at the waterfront, which are basically single story on pilings, are a one-level unit. Going into the middle of the property, they are two-level units with the living room kind of on the first level. And as you get down to the back of the property, the units are reversed with the living rooms on the upper level. So we've tried to stagger the main living spaces, and as well to kind of retain a smaller footprint. A lot of the decks are recessed back up on the upper levels of some of those units as well. And we have provided decks both front and back to kind of capture views no matter which way they sit on the property. As well, the parking, we've taken advantage of the fact that we have to be up on pilings to provide parking under the units. And we hope to further screen that with landscaping and hedging, kind of trying to somewhat mitigate the view of the cars under all of these units, at least as viewed from the common areas within the center of the property. So that's kind of the architectural overview, and we're here to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Any questions from directors? Martina,
Great.
two
Thank
questions?
Maybe. So my first question is around those floodplain restrictions and the heights. I know this proposal meets our current regulations, and I'm just wondering if staff are at all concerned about the data that's going to be coming in from our floodplain mapping, and if that is going to impact specifically this project because it is so close to the water line.
Okay, so through the chair to Director Hanir. So yes, for this proposal, the applicant actually commissioned an independent engineering study to identify what the floodplain setback is, as well as the flood construction level, which is the minimum floor area for any damageable goods. So that's why their setbacks from the ocean is 20 meters instead of our bylaw of 15 meters. And that's why also all the units are on pylons, because these numbers are for the flood situation at the year 2100. So they're actually ahead of our floodplain study, but they did an independent study to make sure that their buildings are located and situated for safe and intended use for many years to come. So 2100 year is their benchmark.
Great. Yeah. No, and kudos to the architects too. I think I really like the way that they are on pylons. I think for future construction around beach areas and waterfront, that's probably the way that we're all going to go. My only concern is for accessibility. You already are up a level, and how, I mean, are there any rules around having to make these cottages accessible at all?
Okay, so through the chair to Director Hamir. This, first of all, this is not a development permit area guidelines, so this was not contemplated or considered in this proposal. But this would be a matter of the building permit stage, because that will be under the BC Building Code.
Okay, so yet to be seen.
Yes, at the building permit stage, this will be discussions between the proponent and our building services group, where they will follow the BC Building Code requirements.
Okay, thank you.
Director Arbor?
Thank you. I mean, it is in Area C, and I guess top of mind for me was, where it'd be nice to have the whole BCOB things finally sorted out before adding 29 new water connections into it. I know we just added a few more, and there was public concern around that. I see there's a little bit of movement on it, but I guess that ball is in Chair Grief's court, and so is the issue around adding that kind of increased output, and with still a lack of septic capacity for that settlement node. Or I know you've been waiting for a plan for the area for some time, but yeah, it's a pretty sizable development, obviously, in that area. But otherwise, in terms of the specifics, I don't have concerns. I just have those broader questions, which I assume will be looked at a little more in the weeks and months to come. I'll leave it to Chair Grief to provide his own thoughts.
Well, I guess anybody who's visited the area, it's very plain that the tourist commercial accommodations that are there right now are about 60 to 70 years behind the times and in badly need of a revamp. This, I think, might be a spark that perhaps would inspire some of the other property owners. When it comes to servicing, that's top of mind. As you know, there is a possibility of a development going farther upland from the foreshore. That part of the master development agreement includes building capacity to take in the most at-risk areas for sewer, and we're going to be discussing that later on. Also, yeah, you probably read the report from the Black Creek Oyster Bay today. So things are looking good in that department for the third well. We can only hope, and also the Watuco water license is also going to be incorporated into the Black Creek Oyster Bay system. Once we get, again, public assent for everything. So yeah, I'm hopeful that a little bit of a reboot in this area. I mean, it's tourist accommodation, so it's not like multifamily dwellings or something. Probably the water consumption wouldn't be at the same level. And also they have some ideas about being able to draw water at less than peak times and store it for their own use. There was a suggestion at the APC around cisterns and capturing rainwater, especially for agriculture or landscape use. So they thought they'd take that into consideration as well. So I think it checks off all the right boxes. I certainly think that this is we talk about sight lines and the views. I mean, it's unsurpassable on Vancouver Island. It's one of the most beautiful spots anywhere, with the view of the Coast Mountains off across the strait. So, you know, it hopefully we can transition into a modern, sustainable tourist accommodation community there. And you know, as time goes by, I might be looking to some of the other directors for some Canada Works funds to help it happen. Okay, so any other questions on receipt? Anybody not in favor? Then that carries. And the recommendation?
I'll move.
Moving second on recommendation. Any further discussion on that? On the recommendation, anybody not in favor? Okay, that carries. At this point, just before we get into mandatory septic system testing, I'm going to call for a short break. So we're going to adjourn for just a few minutes and come right back.
Just let us know when you're about ready, Director Grieve.
I'm okay. Is Director Arbor around? Daniel, comment ça va? Daniel, you online? What does it say? Oh, you're off. Camera's off and your mic's off, so there you go. We'll give him a few more minutes.
Sounds good. Thanks.
Meanwhile, can we have a close-up of Vince's beard? I just want to encourage him to stick with it.
You too can be Papa Smurf.
Mr. Chair, I think you've got me beat at the moment.
Hey, I've already trimmed. My wife's trimmed it twice already. I grow like a fiend. I am Papa.
To be honest, this is
Daniel, you're back.
This is my third post-COVID beard.
I'd just like to say something about the coming days, and that is we're close to my 3-year anniversary. The reason I say this now is that the very first report that I received by this regional district was Vince talking about mosquitoes.
Oh, the memories.
You just wait till killer mosquitoes come into a neighborhood near you. Okay, well, let's get the show back on the road, call this meeting back to order. Now we are on a report on the septic system mandatory testing. And there's a report here for receipt, a very extensive report for receipt.
Second.
Over to Vince.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I did have a bit of a presentation put together for this. So we bring it up. So yeah, the purpose of the report is to present the results of a study investigating options for septic system maintenance programs in the CVRD's electoral areas. The study of options was completed for us by WSP, and it's attached to the staff report as appendix. Oops.
There it was.
There it is. Yeah, that's the one. Great. You could skip ahead to slide number 2, Jake. Yeah, so for a bit of background on this, there are approximately 9,000 septic systems in the electoral areas of the CVRD. These range from old systems that have been in place for several decades to new type 3 systems that return high quality effluent to the environment. Prior groundwater studies in some areas have shown evidence of septic system failures through the presence of nitrates and fecal coliforms that exceed BC water quality guidelines. In 2016, CVRD liquid waste planning staff started researching the practices of other BC regional districts related to septic systems management. The outcome of this research was the launch of the CVRD septic education program in fall 2018, providing information on proper septic care and maintenance through workshops and online resources. Education is considered a foundational part of any septic management program. Next slide, please. While BC's sewage systems regulation makes homeowners legally responsible for proper care and maintenance of their septic systems, there is no follow-up at a provincial level to confirm that this is happening. WSP's report includes information on 3 options beyond education to encourage and/or enforce proper septic maintenance. First on this spectrum is a mandatory pump out program. This would stipulate that septic tanks must be pumped out at a specified frequency. The Capital Regional Districts program, which is the only regional district regulatory program for septic systems in BC, mandates that all type 1 systems must be pumped out every 5 years. Next up in the spectrum would be a mandatory inspection. This would see all systems in the program's service area inspected by an authorized person on a periodic basis, for instance, once every 6 years or so. The homeowner would be provided with a report. This would identify any necessary maintenance and repairs. The inspections would be coordinated and conducted by the regional district. While follow-up would not be provided under this option, this is founded on the principle of homeowners making the right decisions on protecting their property by being properly informed of the needs of their particular system. Moving on up the spectrum would be a mandatory inspection and maintenance program. This would be similar to the mandatory inspection program, but would include a follow-up enforcement component to ensure that maintenance and repairs are completed by the homeowner. Estimated costs for operating these programs are summarized in Table 1 of the staff report, ranging from about $330,000 per year for a mandatory pump-out program in high-risk areas only to $1.8 million for an electoral area-wide mandatory inspection and maintenance program. Next slide, please. In regards to program considerations, the first consideration is public awareness. Awareness is key to increasing willingness to properly maintain systems and informing homeowners about the benefits of proper maintenance. In terms of effectiveness, avoiding a one-size-fits-all approach through programs that are tailored to individual system needs can be more effective. With respect to understanding risks and benefits of programs, the graphic on the right illustrates how risk can vary dependent on a variety of factors in different areas. A program that provides benefits to a high-risk area may not provide a similar level of benefits to a lower-risk area. Collection and management of data is also very important in terms of evaluating risk and also evaluating program effectiveness going forward. The question of enforcement is an important consideration. It may not be a required component of a program, but could be beneficial in areas of higher risk. And of course, as discussed on the previous slide, program costs can be significant, and recovery of these costs in a fair and equitable fashion would be important to successful program delivery. One other consideration is gaining the authority to implement a program. As public health is an area of concurrent provincial and local government authority, guidance we've received from the province indicates cabinet approval of an order in council would be required to allow for CVRD management of septic systems. Other regional district programs, such as the CRDs, were authorized through a liquid waste management plan process. Next slide. In regards to CVRD context, the first is variability in land use. In the CVRD's electoral areas, this land use can vary from resource lands with little to no human settlement to residential areas with almost urban levels of density. This results in varying levels of environmental and public health risk. This would make it difficult for a one-size-fits-all approach to be effective in all areas. For inspection-based programs, local authorized person capacity to provide inspection services would also be important to program success. According to ASTT and EGBC records, there are only 7 authorized persons currently that provide inspection services in the Comox Valley.
Mm-hmm.
Another constraint, environmental constraints, such as shallow or tight soils, high winter water table, steep slopes, and proximity to water courses will also limit the effectiveness of management programs where these constraints are present. The policy statements of the regional growth strategy also point towards resolving septic-related issues through the eventual provision of publicly owned sewer services within core settlement areas. These will be settlement nodes and settlement expansion areas in the electoral areas. The mapping work completed as part of the WSP study does show that many of the higher risk areas for septic issues do correlate with the core settlement areas designated in the RGS. And just the map on the screen here, it kind of captures some of this context. This shows a high concentration of small lots. These are lots less than 0.2 hectares. This is an area of environmental constraints. It's also located within a settlement expansion area. The public health risk in this area is somewhat mitigated as drinking water is supplied by a community water system, in this case, the Comox Valley Water Service. Last slide. In regards to next steps, due to the COVID-19 pandemic resulting financial pressures on many households, next steps include continuing the existing septic education program while moving some or all of the workshops to an online format, while also gathering additional information to support potential septic management program implementation in the future. This would involve continued work with the province to confirm the process required to gain the necessary authority for us to take on septic systems management, and to also request full access to Island Health's septic sewage system regulation filings through a data sharing agreement. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any additional questions on the report.
Thank you very much. Any questions?
Sure, if I could
Directors?
go ahead. So yeah, very glad to see this report come up today. It's not, it's a difficult report because I think most residents understand that it's important as part of just community sustainability to manage our flows and potential impacts on groundwater and other environmental values. And at the same time, everybody understands that this may lead to further costs if some of these things would be implemented. To me, the report was good in highlighting some of the high risk areas, and I'm supportive of that approach to look at it that way. And I think the rationale in this presentation for why that would be is good. It does raise some questions around some cost comparison as well, because if we start focusing on some of those high-risk areas, I know some residents, and including myself, have thought about whether small community sewage systems could be an alternative solution. So if I look on Hornby and places like Sandpiper here, or Whaling Station, which were identified in the report, or at Ships Point and Fanny Bay, whether it would be good to assess out the potential costs of maintenance and inspection programs over many years versus investing in capital infrastructure. I actually don't know, probably the engineers have an idea of whether that would be way more expensive and not feasible, but that I'm sure that would be a question in the communities, especially where you have these really high density lots. Overall, I think it's good. I think everybody knows that the status quo is not very desirable if we're trying to meet objectives and are concerned about what's in our groundwater. But it may be that, you know, we take our time with this. It could be another part of the report was asking whether this would require electoral assent, or whether that's something we could do within the liquid waste management service. If it goes to electoral, I would suggest that that could be a ballot question at the next municipal election. So that would give us a couple of years to look at it, inform the public, seek some feedback, and make recommendations to the public around some options. But yeah, really pleased. I mean, it was a strategic priority of the ENC to look at this, and I found the report very comprehensive. And in terms of COVID-19 impact, again, if it's in 2 or 3 years from now, I think we can't put it on the back burner. But even if there wasn't COVID, I would still say this is probably the next couple of years that we need to detail some of those options, better understand what a rollout could look like, and seek some public feedback as well. So that's my thoughts.
Thank you. Any more thoughts?
Just a clarifying question to staff. I know we do have some kind of service or agreement with the cabin owners on Comox Lake. So, because a question for me was, what service would this go under? So for that program, is there a specific service that it falls under to manage those cabins?
Liquid waste.
It's under LWMP?
No, just liquid waste planning
Oh,
service.
Actually, Chair Grieve, Mark Rutten can answer the question specifically with respect to the properties on Comox Lake.
Yeah, so for the properties contained within the Comox Lake Land Corp lands, those properties are all within the village of Cumberland. They're not connected to any of the sewage system there. They all have on-site systems. So the regional district doesn't have any ongoing management of those systems. But as part of the purchase agreement for the land, Comox Lake Land Corporation land that we purchased for watershed protection, the purchase agreement includes a clause where each landowner has to update their septic systems to the latest standards in exchange for receiving a portion of the payment for the property. So that's how that worked, but there is no ongoing maintenance by the regional district.
Thanks for clarifying that. I think I'll echo Director Arbor's comments that I think that this is something that we need to move forward on. And not that it needs to be done in 2020, but I think forward looking. I would support the recommendation that we approach Island Health for their data. And I do like the idea of targeting some of the more at-risk sites first, just because for better, I guess, bang for the buck. And knowing that there are some, failing septics that are close to either freshwater or, ocean water that we really need to address.
Well, we already have our liquid waste, electoral area liquid waste planning function, and it already takes a big slug of money. And I've always questioned, where does that money go? We don't do liquid waste management, but then it turns into things like, the report up at Miracle Beach for their rain gardens and water management and stuff like that. A lot of that stuff is kind of esoteric and depends on cooperation and partnership with provincial ministries, which may or may not be forthcoming. I think the very fact that we've got over 50, some areas have over 50% failure rate on their septics. The systems went in long before current standards. Not to say that on-site can't be, especially today with the new systems, can't be a viable way of handling effluent. But these old ones that are failing or teetering, and mine here is from the 70s, and I've had the camera run down the runs and everything, and had it cleaned out. I get my tank pumped every 5 years. And it's running at about 70% efficiency, which is okay. It's just, two of us living here. But some are worse than that. So one size doesn't fit all. I agree with that totally. But certainly we're not going to get any action from the province until somebody gets sick. It's like the Trent River, until somebody gets ringworm, they're not going to hold Cumberland responsible. We've got areas that weren't even mentioned. I didn't see Croto Beach in the mix. It must be in there because Croto Beach, you've got well, septic going. They don't even have a community water. They reject community water. So, you know, somebody has to hold the feet to the fire a little bit on this, especially in these areas where it's like Saratoga, like the areas that Daniel mentioned before, where we have a defined problem. We have a real area. Pardon me. So we do have a function. It depends on how we allocate those funds. Certainly, we've got different comparators out there. I read about one constituency in Ontario where they have every 7 years you have a pump an inspection. Now you say we've already got the professionals out there with the yellow trucks and what have you that'll come and do the job, and they can pretty well tell you what shape your system's in. So it isn't like we have to rush out and hire staff. We can use the private sector to do this. And even though the Ontario constituency doesn't have any actual follow-up, they just basically assume that the property owners are going to do what's best for their property, but they bring it to their attention. I think there could be something worked out over the long haul where we require people to send in a copy of the fact that they've had their pumps, their tanks pumped. We got 9,000 septics out there, and I think that's probably an underestimation. I know over on Hornby, like in some of the places like Daniel talks about, they're just, a lot of those cabins are seasonal. So, I mean, they're probably even in worse shape. So I would agree that we have to move ahead. It's not like we're trying to hit people over the head with a big stick here. You know, it's a real serious health issue. So we have to get the stats that we need. We need to ask Island Health for the records so we can start building some kind of database on this. As I say, we don't have to go to the gold-plated $3 million standard on this, but we can certainly start to move in that direction. And just the very fact that we are doing it will make people more aware of their systems, and we've got people turn up at our open houses. It's very informative. I know that I learned a lot of stuff I didn't even know. So, you know, and I've been on a septic out here since I bought the place. So I think that we have to make the motions. We have to start moving in that direction. I don't see it being something we're going to hammer the public with next year or something like that. But we have to make it very clear that this is a serious issue, and we're here to help. We're here to educate and find a suitable way of moving forward. I know that there was some talk of some kind of a referendum. Sarah, by the way, do extend our appreciation to Sarah for the work she did on this as well. But you know, I'm dead set against any kind of yes/no referendum on anything. I think you should offer people, you know, at least 3 choices, because given a yes/no, everybody picks a default, which is no. So I mean, no is not sustainable. We've seen that with the first referendum down in Union Bay, which is actually the 3rd referendum, I guess. So, you know, let's put one foot in front of the other and start moving on this issue. And it may be a few years before it comes up. I think Daniel said maybe it'll be an issue around the next election, but people have to be cognizant of it, have to raise the awareness on this issue. So I'll be supporting it.
I have an additional.
Please.
Yeah, so for staff, like I agree with the gather additional information. And another one, when it comes back to us, that would be interesting is more detail on the mechanics and the costs of some of those other systems. Like I know when we were at FCM in Quebec, we saw a rural program that was pump out, but it'd be good to have a bit more information around what it might actually look like. I know this report actually laid out a lot of first level detail, but if there is general support for looking at high risk areas, maybe we can dig a little bit further and seek a little bit more information about what a couple of those options might actually look like for the Comox Valley. So, yeah, so I agreed with both Dr. Amir and Chair Greaves' comments, and thanks to staff for a job well done on this first report for sure.
And Chair and Directors, thank you very much for your questions. Staff have taken some good notes, and we'll keep those in mind for subsequent reports and moving this matter forward in public consultation.
Okay, Director Hamir, are you still with us?
I'll move that all costs be attributed to Area B. Nobody's seconding the motion.
No, I don't think we'll second that one. Let's just vote on receipt. We can do that. We have a quorum with the two of us, so.
Yeah, so I'll move receipt.
Second. Any opposed? That carries. It would be nice to have Arzina back in here, maybe.
For the next item, for sure.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah, we can take a small break till she comes back.
Well, I think we're going to lose our CAO if I'm not mistaken. He has another meeting he has to rush off to.
Yes, that's correct. But James Warren will be here on my behalf for the rest of the meeting. So best of luck, Directors. Thank you. I'm sorry I'm going to miss your presentations.
Well, I think we can safely move on the requested action, because it's just to request the information from Island Health, is it not?
And yes, and look at regulatory framework a bit more with the province. Oh, there's Arzina. Good.
There she is.
Yeah, we were just moving the requested action, Arzina.
There you go.
Okay, sorry. Moved and seconded.
Good. Any not in favor? That carries. Very good. So now we move on to roadside collection in A, B, and C for receipt.
Move receipt.
Second.
Over to
Sarah Willie will be here to
Sarah's here.
PowerPoint and walk us through the staff report, and available for any questions following.
Thank you, James. We'll just give Jake a minute to get the presentation up. Great. So thank you today for joining us. We'd like to speak about rural roadside collection and the opportunity to create a service area there. As well, we wanted to update you on opportunities for diversion during COVID, as we know that there's some challenges with constituents. So a latest update, I know the report itself came out last week, and since then we've got some new information that both the private recycling depots in Courtenay and Comox have reopened. So that's positive. We've reached out to see how that's been going. They've both implemented some operational changes to allow that to happen for their staff to be able to feel safe, and also for residents to maintain social distancing. During COVID and since mid-March, staff at CVRD have been working closely with our peers across the province, connecting with them on a regular basis, primarily other regional districts and local governments, on how we can continue to operate our facilities safely. And we have benefited a lot from that exchange of information. And we also reached out to our local Campbell River, Courtenay, Comox private depots to share any learnings that we had during that time. Those private depots have their own social network, and they were also sort of meeting themselves and exchanging information. And I think we saw, the initial reaction of closing of a number of those depots across the province. At peak, there were 84 closed across the province, and we're down now to only 21 depots, with 11 of those on Vancouver Island. So some great strides have been made to be able to reopen that network. To accommodate those closures, we did started to accept electronics and deposit containers at the Comox Valley Waste Management Center. And we were able to work with the stewardship programs there to make sure that those materials were handled safely. In regards to the unstaffed depots, the Comox Strathcona Waste Management Depot in Canucks will remain open until July 2021. So there is an opportunity there through the fall and winter, if pandemic was to return, to continue to operate that. And we do see moving forward with our planned closure of Courtney Country Market at this time, but that's of course to be discussed. We did monitor those depots to see if there was any change. Certainly throughout both British Columbia and North America, the haulers have been reporting an increase in residential recycling picked up from curbside of anywhere from 10 to 30%. That increase in residential recycling and waste has been offset by a decrease in commercial volumes. And what we saw at these unstaffed depots was that we didn't see an increase in recycling. And so it sort of leads to us to believe that there is some commercial use of those facilities as well. And so we just wanted to just remind those businesses that commercial recycling is available at the Comox Valley Waste Management Center for a tipping fee, and that there's also a paid service that they could subscribe to as well. So moving on to the main topic, considerations for service area boundary for creation of a roadside pickup service. Certainly that is something we've been looking at for a while and fits in well with the situation. So what we've been trying to understand is where the desire for the service is the strongest and where the status quo is preferred. So staff were able to participate in an open house that was being held for areas B and C in February. And we just started that process and with formal consultation to come. So considering the establishment of the service area, one of our main points that we're looking at is the eligibility to transition that recycling program over to Recycle BC after a period of 2 years. And so we have seen the draft criteria. Those criteria have been submitted to the ministry by Recycle BC at the end of 2019, but the ministry has not yet responded to formalize and accept those criteria. As they stand, they are a minimum household density of 0.42 households per hectare, a minimum population of 5,000 residents, and roadside garbage collection program, as I said, has to be in place for a minimum of 2 years. And that is just garbage and not recycling. But in terms of change management, it certainly can be easier to introduce both at the same time. There's a couple of additional criteria. And one of those is that island communities must meet the criteria standing alone. So they don't allow us to include the population of, say, Denman with Area A. In order to meet that criteria, it must have 5,000 residents on its own in order to participate. So neither Hornby nor Denman meet that criteria. And I think in our consideration of whether to proceed with including them in our analysis, we looked at the strength of the depots in those communities, and I think that's where Recycle BC is looking as well in trying to not over provide a service. They would not want to undermine the value that those depots bring to those communities by having a redundant, in their mind, redundant curbside service. So next slide. So part of looking at how our community would meet that criteria, we looked at the current density in the electoral areas, excluding those 2 islands. And we looked at non-vacant properties with land use of residential, farm, or commercial. And that's something that we can refine as we go through this consultation process and hear from residents and certainly from yourselves. And I think that's a key outcome of today, is that we'd really like to hear from the directors on any areas that they'd like us to pursue during the consultation, whether it be inclusion, exclusion of farm properties, how to manage commercial properties or mixed use properties, and those sorts of things. So just wanted to provide a bit of a close up on the density map, because I know it is a bit challenging to see the format. But looking at the density, what it provides us at a high level is it shows those pockets. And I think similar to the septic conversation and transit analysis, it looks at those areas where the most efficient collection service could be created, in areas where through high demand from residents, we could accommodate. But certainly it calls out a few high density areas that we mentioned within the report. So within electoral area A, we mentioned Ships Point, Fanny Bay, Union Bay. Electoral area B is quite dense on its own, with a density of 0.5 households per hectare. So Kitty Coleman, Little River, Lazo Road. And in electoral area C, it's a little bit more sporadic, but there's certainly some communities there of Saratoga, Miracle Beach, Macaulay Road, Doyle Road, and the Old Island Highway 19A corridor potential areas for service. So the next phase for us, if you'd like to go to the next slide, thanks. The next phase for us is really a public engagement process. And that's something that we laid out in the fall. And we wanted to reevaluate as we create that public engagement, whether it would fit within today's pandemic criteria. So most of what we had laid out is going to work well. The one change we looked at was the ability to hold an open house in the fall. And so without that, we're going to focus more on a direct mail and online engagement. So looking at pushing that timeline up a little bit, which will move this project further ahead. We're going to look at phase 1 beginning this spring and summer. Direct mail to approximately 9,500 homes. And a big part as well for us will be to connect with local waste haulers and stakeholders, and to get from them an understanding of where their concerns are, and make sure that everyone who's a player is aware of this process and nobody's caught off guard. We also want to inform and consult on support for the service generally, and understand the results of the referendum that occurred in 2013, and see whether this is a widespread appeal. And then we will be gathering that feedback and reporting back to the ESAC in the fall and winter. Before considering the creation of a new service, we really do want to understand the engagement and the interest level within the community. And so that engagement process will focus on providing information and collecting feedback. So we want to make sure that we hear from you guys today on specific areas of interest you've heard from your constituents, either during campaigning or more recently or through social media. And we look forward to a targeted launch in July of our phase 1 public engagement, and then also creation and launch of a project-specific website.
So questions from directors? Director Hamir.
Yeah, so thanks, Sarah. One question was around the items for pickup. Were you primarily just looking at recyclables? Was there any thought given to yard waste pickup at all?
Yes, for sure. Aligning with the air quality initiatives that the CVRD is taking, and the recent initiatives around COVID and burn bans, we do see that is a challenge for some folks, depending on their lot size and proximity to neighbors. And that's where, through consultation, if there are potentially areas that are more in favor or more well suited to inclusion of yard waste, There are other jurisdictions like the Cowichan Valley Regional District that do deliver different service levels to different parts of their electoral areas in their waste management. So that is an option.
And then just to clarify, the mail outs, are they going to only be going to those areas that you've highlighted in areas A, B, and C? Or are they going to like a wider than this?
They would go, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jake, but to all electoral area residents excluding Hornby and Denman.
And just also got that list, the Royston garbage collection service area as well. Yeah.
That's right, the existing service area.
Okay. Yeah, because I just noticed like under electoral area B, like that Virginia Drive area is not listed when it is quite dense. So, and there's a lot of interest there in both garbage and yard waste pickup. So just wanted to make sure that that area got hit too.
So I would think that I echo what Arzina has just said about some areas. One of the dense areas in area C and area A, to a lesser degree, is the Arden Lake Trail corridor. Did I just miss it, or it's? I know part of Arden Road, one side is the city of Courtenay, the other side is area C, and then farther down is area A. So
Yeah, I don't think we specifically called that out. So thank you, Director Green.
yeah, it's huge. And then of course you've got all the waveland out there and Bates Beach. I saw Bates Beach on it. So, and then yeah, and then of course the whole Williams Beach Road area out at the end of that. But so my question, if there's no other question right now, is we're going to do this right this time, because the last time we did this, we followed the classic example of what not to do, which is discuss, decide, and defend. We actually had the contract awarded before we went to referendum. So, I mean, again, if we're going to do this at all, let's have multiple options out there for people. And you know, rather than yes or no question, which, you know, because I know a lot of people, there was so much misinformation bouncing around at the time that they were going to be charged extra on their taxes and it was going to be a forever contract, when in actuality, I think it was 2 years with a 2-year option or something, you know. But the way social media gets a hold of stuff and shakes it like a Jack Russell, you know, chasing or shaking a rabbit. Yeah, so I mean, if we can keep it flexible, send it out there, compile all the different information we get, include the populace on the decision-making process as much as possible. In the end of the day, not everybody's always satisfied with any decision, but you know, I think that if people are part of the process, they're much more likely to buy in. And even after it was over, I had a lot of people say, what, it failed? You know, I meant to vote for that too. So, you know, then a couple of years later, when are we going to do it again? So there seems to be a bit of a shift out there on recycling. I mean, right, much more so than it was at the time. So I think we'll find there's more support, but we have to make sure that we bring people along every inch of the way.
Yes, thank you. And I think as identified in the engagement plan, you know, we're hoping that through your own networks, that the directors can reach out to their constituents to encourage participation, so that we can get a good idea of geographical boundaries of people that are really supportive of this service. And you know, how do the directors feel about the proposal within the report on moving forward with perhaps not an entire electoral area service, but one that may be targeted at higher density areas or just non-inclusive in general? Is that a direction that you feel at this time would be the right way to go?
Well, we need 5,000, right?
Yes.
To make it a service, so it could be split up. Also, you made a point of saying that it doesn't preclude people that aren't included, that they can actually apply to be included.
That's right.
So once they see their neighbors, more like, you know, Carlmarnock area, once they saw Royston getting this incredible deal on their garbage and their recycling, while they were paying like 3 times more, they want it in. So, you know, it may take a little bit of show me to show them that it does work.
Yeah. Sarah, could I clarify like how that would work? For example, in Electoral Area Bay, if Virginia Drive were included and then Kitty Coleman included, would that mean that the rural areas in between would not? Like the truck would be just driving by and not picking up? Or how are you seeing that work out?
Yeah, I think through discussions with the haulers, that would be one way to approach inclusion or exclusion. Also through the consultation, if we hear from folks that they'd prefer to not see the truck drive by rather than self-haul. But it certainly wouldn't need to be a rural versus urban. It could be based on an efficient collection hauling route.
Yeah, yeah. Because in some ways, like I can understand concentrating on the dense areas, but it means then that the less dense areas, even if there is, you know, interest, that economically it's harder for them to make the case. Whereas if we're kind of, you know, diluting some of that denseness by including a few less dense areas, it spreads the economy over a wider area. I would prefer that rather than just having pockets and excluding areas in between.
Yeah, if I can, were you done your point, Dr.?
Yeah, I was. Thanks. Go ahead.
Yeah, I have a similar thinking. If I think of the trucks coming down to Area A, you know, that we've got a few side roads that are dense, that are small. And then I know this, yeah, exactly. Like maybe it would be good to see the cost implication of both options. You know, of looking at just the dense areas that you've identified versus the cost option. And I don't think that was fully detailed in the report, unless you can correct me, Sarah. I don't remember seeing it there, but what the cost impact could be per household that participates in the service. Because I actually know a lot of people that are pushing for garbage and recycling that are not in those dense areas.
Yeah.
And then the question would remain for them with, you know, what would that scene look like? Would that mean that they would remain with private haulers anyways at more expensive contracts? I know we're getting rid of some of the recycling drop-off, so what would some of the people do? I know many residents continue to drive all the way to the landfill with their stuff. And if they're on a bigger lot, they would the garbage truck drive in front of their house and, you know, still have to get, who knows, right?
Yeah.
So I think just the costing would be important. The second point is thank you for the feedback on Hornby and Denman. There's a lot of noise coming from one of the mics here. Sarah, I do have this is a bit of a peripheral question, but I sure wish that we had garbage pickup, because right now the staff at the depot and others in the communities in light of COVID are really worried, and that probably needs a follow-up with you guys with the recycling committee, at least on Hornby, because if things reopen up this summer, when I went to the depot last weekend, we're at about 1,500 people maybe on the island right now. And I had a 25 minute wait in my car driving up because they've got procedures around COVID. So if we go from 1,500 to 4,000 or 5,000, many people are starting to freak out that the garbage situation on Hornby will not work. And for me, it's almost to the point when I start thinking through it, is I'm like, if you guys get on that now thinking about it, it may be that we have to do a special request for garbage pickup this summer to get if things reopen to stage 3 with COVID, and if the depot wants to maintain the COVID procedures that they've had in place so far. Because I can totally confirm, I've been going there every weekend, and it's slow to a crawl, and I don't see it working with 5,000 people. So that's a side topic. But coming back to the garbage recycling, even if you go to it says spring summer, but oh yeah, that's for the direct mail. Yeah, so that's okay. And again, my feedback would be, so the 9,500 homes, just to clarify, are those the ones that you consider in the high density zones? So for example, when you name Ships Point and Fanny Bay, like Fanny Bay has a bunch of rural properties in and around Fanny Bay, and Ships Point is very dense. Like where do you draw the line of those 95? I think Arzina asked, but I wasn't sure on the answer.
So it would include those rural properties as well.
It would include the rural properties. Okay, great. Yeah, so I'm fully in favor of your consultation plan and everything that's in your engagement approach. And again, just like the septic report, I thought that was really a well done report, and thank you for that effort.
Could I confirm that we are looking at a weekly recycling pickup, but a bi-weekly garbage pickup? I mean, it seems to be the way that all the municipalities are going to anyways, and I would hate to have to start a weekly thing and then drop.
I think that's something we would probably try and consult on during the summer. But certainly the suggestion, sorry to confirm, was weekly garbage, bi-weekly recycling, or the alternative?
No, the other way around. So weekly recycling, but you know, we should be having way less garbage, especially if you're doing yard waste pickup as well.
Ooh.
Yeah, so that would be something that we can confirm with folks, and it may look at, you know, we've heard back from rural people occasionally that one thing of garbage every 2 weeks they don't feel is sufficient. So it might be something that we need to look at. Not everyone's as progressive as in their zero waste lifestyle.
Right.
And it may be a way that we win favor to move forward.
Well, yeah, just as a way of cutting a few costs, not having weekly garbage is, I think, one way. And then it just encourages, I find the people who can't do a bi-weekly garbage is because their garbage is full of recycling. So
exactly.
You know, once all of that stuff gets pulled out, there really should be, you know, very little going out in the garbage.
Absolutely agreed. Yeah, we do. I mean, there's always bad actors out there. And, you know, examples from some jurisdictions where, you know, you pay depending on what size garbage cart you have, for example. So if you have a small and large garbage cart, you pay a different rate, but everyone gets a really big recycling cart. You don't pay, you know, for that size of recycling cart. What some jurisdictions find is that people will go for the smallest garbage cart, and then they will just put their excess garbage in the recycling bin. And so that's a situation that we wouldn't want to get into, where we clamp down too hard on garbage and then contaminate the recycling stream out of convenience from that weekly pickup. So it's definitely a balance, but I hear what you're saying about reinforcing the messaging that there should be more recycling than garbage.
Great.
Okay, I guess that brings us to vote on receipt. So anybody not in favor of receipt?
I'm excited about receipt.
No, this is good progressive stuff, and I know there's always the idiots out there that abuse everything, and it's a certain percentage of the population that doesn't seem to get better as with education or with different standards or what have you. They just continue on, so we have to deal with that. Okay, so can we move the recommended action then?
So moved.
To move ahead on this? Okay. Any more discussion? Call a question. All in favor? Or all against? Sorry. Anybody opposed? It's getting late. Okay, so we got a couple we can rattle through here pretty quick, I guess. Solom River Access Swimming. A report for receipt.
Move receipt.
Second.
And James, do you have anybody speak to that? Just
Yeah, I
for
do.
questions?
Brian Albert's come to the table, and I think Mark Harrison just ducked out, but he might come back in to help as well. So, Brian, did you have a couple points to make on this staff report on the first one?
Thank you, James. So we've brought this item back to the committee this morning to give you a little bit of an update, but also find out where it sits amongst your park priorities at this point. So back in December, you'll recall that you gave direction to staff to work with the city of Courtenay, see if we couldn't have some parking created at the end of Dove Creek Place. And you'll see there in Appendix B that we did get a response from the city on April the 24th, where they're thinking that it's maybe best not to have parking at the cul-de-sac there. They're wanting to ensure that access is maintained to the exhibition grounds for events and especially for emergency vehicles that need to get in there. So they've denied our request to have some parking created there. So it kind of brings us back to the options that we're looking at in December, whether we should be exploring some of the accesses to the Solom that are not open at this point, which means working with the property owners and the Agricultural Land Commission and creating some opportunities for people to get down to the Solom where they can't now. Some other possibilities are to look at some of the other waterways in the valley, maybe on the Puntledge or on the Trent or Browns. And then another option is to just try and improve access to the Solom where the regional district already has control over the land. So that would be like headquarters town site for Solom River Commons, Solom Spirit Park, and the exhibition grounds would be some maybe opportunities that we could explore. But at this point, park staffs are thinking that maybe we just set it aside for now and focus on some of our other park priorities.
Oh, you're muted, Evan.
Any comments out there? Well, I have one. I think we have to keep this top of mind at all times. We've already seen where we look the other way and all of a sudden land's given away that we had expressed interest in all along, that senior government seems to be tone deaf on the needs of the local residents. Case in point, of course, is the old Reese Bridge across the Solom. I know that they've the farmer that took over the roadway there has put up no trespassing signs. I know that the person that lives right by the bridge, even though it's an ROW through there, has put up no trespassing signs. I know that farther up on Dove Creek Road, some property owners have dug big ditches along the side of the road to discourage people from coming onto what is a right of way. I just think that we have to keep the pressure on at all times, because if we lay off, we're going to lose it. And we've already lost so much and we lose it forever. It never comes back. I mean, the public right of way is a very important piece of parks. We've seen that. So I think that at least we have to keep the pressure on. Park staff have to be ever vigilant on these pieces disappearing, especially backroom deals of senior government, which we've seen over the years. So that's my 2 cents worth. And I think there's a huge gap between the exhibition ground and the headquarters park. And I'm disappointed with the city as well, because I know that the previous mayor, Larry Jangula, he wanted that cul-de-sac be right by the river, and so that people would have access to the river. And he was basically, even though he was a mayor, he's basically overruled by his staff. So must be a culpability, some kind of a exposure to risk factor or something.
I could provide a comment.
Please.
Yeah, I think, you know, over the long term, I think it's important to try to maintain our opportunities around things like that, and to not not lose them. They're hard, as Dr. Chair Grieve says, they're hard to regain. But when I read the report, I started thinking about all that the park staff is going to have to focus on for this summer with COVID and attendance at parks and sign all these different things that are probably going to persist in many of our parks, different procedures. So, and I was thinking, well, probably we won't have anything happen for this summer, especially with Courtney not saying that. So what I'd suggest is that we pick that up in the fall and, bring it back in the fall or Christmas or something like that. And when things have calmed down a little bit, and parks may have a little bit more bandwidth to look at it, because there were multiple sites that had been considered initially, and I thought that was good from a public perspective, and I wouldn't nix it either, that's for sure. So I would just defer it, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
I'd agree with that, but Director Grieve, how do you feel if we just delay it till late fall or early winter?
Well, I think the language was discontinue.
Yeah.
And I think maybe we can change that language. Obviously, we cannot be doing too many projects during not just the pandemic, but even the aftermath. I mean, we're going to be pretty strapped and stretched, and people.
I have a further comment. Sorry, I have a further comment.
Yeah.
We were also talking about redoing a bit of a education and strategy session around our park service. So for information of what our existing strategy and all that. So maybe this could also be captured in that if we manage to have it in the next 12 months. I don't know what the status of that is either. I think that was pre-COVID. We were starting to talk about that, but I don't know if Doug or Mark or anyone has thoughts as to whether we just erased it from our minds or whether it's still live somewhere.
I can quickly speak to that. I think we haven't erased it from our minds, but we're kind of waiting to see how this unfolds and determine the board's strategic direction and whether there's still a desire there. I guess will probably be what we'll be waiting to hear from the board at a future date.
Yeah.
So it's not erased, but it's not top of mind either.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thanks, Doug.
Yeah, while we're discussing, I think with the staff just have to be ever vigilant. I know that we're the last to find out a lot of things, that happen, and it's fait accompli. I would be open to changing the language, much like the Lazo active transportation pathway, from discontinue to suspend when we get to the recommendation. Okay, so receipt. Anybody not in favor of receipt? That carries. And the recommendation with the word suspend, if that would be amicable.
Yeah.
I'll second that.
Yeah. I guess maybe Chair Grieve moved it. You are allowed to.
I will hereby move that with the change where it doesn't say discontinue, it says suspend. So it's not discontinued per se. And seconded?
Yep.
Good. Yep. Okay. Anybody not in favor? That carries. Number 8, Lazo Road active transportation pathway, and motion to receive the report.
Move receipt.
Second.
Over to Doug, I guess. Is Doug going to present? Oh, no, sorry, Mark's right there. Mark's ready to go.
Yeah, so through the chair to the directors, just wanted to present basically an update on the planning process for the Lazo Road active transportation between the Point Homes Community Sand Pines Road to Butchers Road. So at this time, we are recommending that we postpone this project until 2021. So just as a quick recap, we can go into the next slide there if you like. At the October CVRD meeting, there was a resolution to undertake a multi-jurisdictional planning process with Comox and the Ministry of Transportation once there was a new parks superintendent identified and in place at the town of Comox. So since that time, Comox did acquire a new park superintendent to take over for Al Fraser. His name's Andrew Berger. So he started in approximately January of 2020. And shortly after he took his seat in that role, I reached out to him to discuss this Lazo project with him. That kind of resulted in sometime in March where we met with the Ministry of Transportation. We looked at scope and looked at some of the challenges and looked at a little bit of the timeline involved with delivery of this project. And we were looking at essentially design for this year and build in 2021. So obviously things have changed since then. And in April, the town of Comox decided they were going to postpone the delivery of this project. Also, just kind of so you know, in April, the Ministry of Transportation, they did begin a paving project from Guthrie to Simba Road. So that is kind of currently taking place and will be likely done by sometime the end of this month, and that will provide 1.5 meters of paved shoulder through that small section of road. Well, it's 1.1 kilometers, so not too small. I also want to kind of bring forward that in April, the Friends of the Comox and Lazo area, they did send an official letter asking that we would move forward on this project on our own. But staff are recommending that we postpone the delivery of this project just because of the cost savings in terms of synergies with this project. And I think this project does have really strong community partnerships involved with it. And I think if we're going to deliver it, if you look at the map here, the green dotted line is what we're kind of proposing in terms of the active transportation corridor we are looking at delivering. And where it's circled in red is within our jurisdiction. So you can really see that it really goes kind of hand in hand together with Comox. So at this time, we'd like to postpone and just be in line with town of Comox. Happy to take your questions.
Any questions, directors?
Yeah, if I could ask, Mark, did Comox give you any type of timeline of where they think they might pick this up? Are you at the stage where planning is almost complete, or when you pick that up, would you still have to go into a deeper planning stage?
Yeah, I didn't get any direction in terms of when they would look at this project other than 2021. When Andrew and I started to really kind of discuss a little bit of the more details around the planning process, it was just really in its infancy because we only had, approximately a month there. We were kind of discussing it and figuring out how we're going to roll out the RFP. So I think we'd be back at that stage. So kind of really preliminary discussions and figuring out how to roll out an RFP in 2021. So
yeah,
we'd probably be looking at construction realistically 2022.
Okay. Because I also heard back from the constituents in that area, and they're a bit worried about the project being dropped, and wondering if there's any way that our staff can continue working on anything like the I think, is there an amphibian fencing that needs to be installed with Modi, or any parts of this project that are in our jurisdiction still able to go forward, or does it have to be with everybody else?
Yeah, no, I think that we definitely don't have to do everything with the town of Comox. Like there is potentially an opportunity with Lazo. So when they redid that section of the road through the Lazo Marsh, they did put in extra culverts, and those culverts are going to be used for amphibian crossings. At some point in the fall, they're going to look at actually establishing the fencing there, and that could involve some extensions to the culverts, which might work at some future stage to build an expanded shoulder there. But we would have to look at that a little bit further and likely bring on a consultant to kind of maybe look at whether that was even possible from a design perspective, whether it could fit in that road right away or not. So there is that possibility. You know, at this stage, resources within parks is pretty stretched, and we're quite thin. So I'm
Okay.
a little bit hesitant on taking on additional projects. But if it was, you know, potentially if it was really focused on something like that, and I could bring in a consultant, then that's something that we could definitely look at. Something like that would probably be in the range of $5,000 to $10,000.
Yeah. I mean, I hope, I think a side project like that, just to keep some movement alive and show that the public that we haven't forgotten about them. And if it's something that was going to be included in the larger project anyways, if we could continue doing that, I'd be in favor of it. It doesn't sound like a large financial ask. And if, as you said, a consultant can do the bulk of the work, I'd be in favor. Would that require a change in this recommendation, or can it be included? Is that something that you just take into consideration?
No, I think that was one of the options. So that was option, essentially option 2. So that would be like, for just to clarify, you know, the 5,000 to 10,000 would just give us essentially a design. It doesn't talk about construction with that kind of price. But it would kind of show that we are kind of potentially moving things forward. But that would be option 2 rather than option 1.
Yeah, I would like to go forward with that, but just would like to hear from the other directors how they're feeling.
Daniel?
No, I concur with Arzina. Yep. I mean, it's going to be a good project. It's just a timing, you know what I mean? So I'm on board. Dr. Grieve? Dr. Grieve, there's a tidal wave that has just...
There I am. Okay, good. Sounds good to me. Okay, so we're on receipt. Let's just call it on receipt then. All in favor? All against? It passes. And Arzina, do you want to move it with option 2?
Yeah, so I'll direct staff to postpone the delivery of the Lazo Road Pathway project until 2021, except for the portion of the trail over the Lazo Marsh, to see if design and build synergies exist with the Modi amphibian fencing project.
Very good. Seconded?
Second.
Okay, then on that recommendation, anyone opposed? Sounds good. Okay, so that brings us to the end of the public portion of this program. And we need a motion to adjourn to the in-camera portion.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Any opposed? Good. Okay, so we need to go offline and